I heard that you got your start in politics and local politics. So what made you, start your career in public service and then take the jump to run for higher office?
Sure. Well, it's kind of a uneven, not traditional path. I actually was a documentary film editor for 15 years. I moved back to Holyoke after living in New York, became a yoga instructor, and just got involved in the community. And a group of us, including a couple individuals that were on the city council, started an organization called CRUSH, which was called the Citizens for the Revitalization and Urban Success of Holyoke, which is why acronyms are really good because no one wants to say all that. And it just got me in tune with what was going on in Holyoke. My dad had been an advocate in Holyoke and a social justice advocate and warrior for 40 plus years. And so those two things kind of converged, and the next thing you know, I ran for city council. Really just started questioning why Holyoke was in the situation it was in, why it really hadn't really achieved and moved forward, and always interested in how the city works and government. And I won the first time I ran for city council at large, and that started the whole path. Alex Morse then became mayor while I was on the city council, and things were just changing a lot in Holyoke, and the idea of running for state rep kind of came to me, and again, was nothing I had ever planned for or could have imagined. And again, first time I ran, I won. So here I am today, almost 7 years later.
I am under the impression that you've gone through and you've done a lot of work environmentally and you've done a lot of work locally. Can you talk to me about what you did when you were a local elected official in the city of Holyoke?
Sure. A couple of the highlights locally. I think environmentally specifically, I was involved with the citizens in a lot of advocacy organizations around the closing of the coal plant in Holyoke. It was already destined to close, there was already regulations, and it was losing money, but how that was going to happen, how that was going to affect the city was obviously a big loss of tax dollars, there was loss of jobs, but being able to work with the community and create a real viable plan for the decommissioning of the coal plant, and then of course the remediation of the land so it can be reused. That was definitely one of the highlights. Another highlight I think was working on the urban renewal plan with the then planning director Kathy Anderson and then the current planning director Marcus Marrero. We actually have the biggest urban renewal plan in the Commonwealth, really addressing some of our blighted buildings, really addressing the opportunity, also addressing workforce, education. And so that process of working with the different departments in the city and again the residents of the city really informed a lot of my priorities here today as a state rep.
That's wonderful. I want to talk about education. I know that you just mentioned that, and the House and Senate just passed the education bill. I want to get your thoughts on that, and then moving forward, I'd like to ask a little bit more about your work on the Higher Education Committee.
Sure. Well, the Student Opportunity Act is a great bill that came out of the Education Committee, and the Senate took it up last week, and we're waiting anxiously to take it up in the House in the next couple of weeks. Of course, this session, if we look back for a minute, this session started with a little bit of a disappointment from last session. There was an education bill that didn't make it over the finish line, as we say. It kind of didn't get agreed upon in the conference committee really on our last day. And so there was a lot of sort of depressed and upsetness over that. But the silver lining is that the bill that came out just a few weeks ago from the Education Committee, in my opinion, is 10 times the bill that bill was. Really addresses economically disadvantaged, really infuses real dollars and funding across the Commonwealth for every community, addresses special education in ways that we had planned and additional ways, such as including transportation costs into actual special education costs, addressing the insurance issue, the health insurance issue that all of our districts are dealing with, English language learners, and a recommitment to the charter school funding reimbursement plan. So I'm so excited that this bill came forward. This bill doesn't fix everything educationally. There's still other issues to tackle, including charter schools, including transportation, but the hard work of the committee and the hard work of a lot of my colleagues that had signed on to the Promise Act, which was a bill that we filed at the beginning of the session that really set these sort of lofty goals, particularly on low income, getting to 100% on that 10th decile for our most needy kids. That was incorporated. And so I think that what we were able to do in moving those goalposts a little bit farther and achieving that, I think that we are really looking at real investments in our education system across the Commonwealth over the next 7 years, something that's really going to move the needle. and we're very excited. I'm so excited to be working with the chairwoman, Alice Peisch, and of course her Senate colleague, Jason Lewis, on this, and all my colleagues that we worked really hard digging into Chapter 70, which is not an easy formula to understand, and really digging into all the aspects of it. So it's a really exciting day for the Commonwealth.
Absolutely. And as far as higher education goes, how can we lower costs, not only in Massachusetts, but really on a larger scale, federally, across the country? What is the method that we can use?
Well, I think there's a couple of things to think about. First, this investment in K-12 education with the Student Opportunity Act is going to give students a better support and a better platform to enter higher ed if that's their choice. Right now, one of the biggest things hurting some of our higher education institutions, especially the community college level, is that often over half the students enrolling as freshmen are taking remedial English and math. That's a drain on our system, it's a drain on their resources, it's a drain on Pell Grants, it's a drain across the system, and it's frustrating for the individual, and if they can't get through that, they're not going to even commit or complete community college. So I think a lot of the work in preparing students for community college or four-year university happens in the K-12, and I think with this investment, we're going to make some real strides in that. On the backside of that coin, of course, there is also the Cherish Act, which is a bill filed to look at the funding mechanism for higher education. That's critical. We need more funding for our community colleges and our state universities, because a lot of times people talk about them being, the affordable choice, but they're more than that. They're a quality choice. Holyoke Community College, Greenfield, STCC, quality community colleges in Western Mass. And across the Commonwealth, obviously, especially in Western Mass, again, some of the best universities, obviously UMass leading that. I think what we need to do is also look at how these degrees are what degrees really need to be obtained. Obviously, I'm a proponent of higher education, but it's not for everybody. And community colleges can also be that certificate program, be in healthcare, be in the manufacturing industry, to help our employers in our manufacturing industry get those trained workers. So I think in some ways we need to look at higher education twofold. First, as obviously a path for some people to become a doctor or a lawyer, those big things we traditionally think about. It should also be thought about enriching our own being as people and understanding the world around us and the love of learning. But it also needs to be a training ground for workforce development, especially at the community college level. So I think reminding students and having those programs where maybe someone, just at that point in life at 18, 19, 20 years old doesn't want to take, another language, doesn't want to take all those requirements to get their associate's degree, wants to take those courses to, become a restaurant manager or become a supervisor on a construction site or go into the healthcare field, get those certificate programs ready. And I think that's a real way to sort of support our community colleges financially and increase the workforce. There's bigger issues, of course, we're looking at loans, the federal government, of course, and they're not sure what they're going to get done as far as higher education. I know a lot of the candidates out there for president have these lofty ideas. It all costs money, and that's what it really comes down to. So I think that we've got to make sure that our community colleges are accessible and become a pathway to four-year universities if that's what they choose. For instance, in Western Mass, Westfield State University, their biggest number of transfers come from Holyoke Community College. And so that kind of pathway for students, that maybe they start at HCC not knowing what they want to do, but they're able to take a variety of classes, they find that one teacher, that one subject that suddenly opens them up, and they can go on to a longer path. And I think that's going to become critical. And the reality is, and we're seeing it now at the community college level, and I can specifically speak for HCC, is going back to their alumni and going out to that business community for support as well. A lot of people who go to HCC and then go to a four-year university think that they graduated from the four-year university, make all their donations and their philanthropy and give back to that four-year university, and kind of forget that it was that two-year university, that community college, that really got them on the right path. So I know that President Royal, who's now the president of HCC, is doing a lot of work to reconnect with that broad scope of those graduates. So a lot of work to be done. Obviously, on the higher ed committee, we're looking at a lot of funding mechanisms, but it's going to be where does the money come from?
Absolutely. I want to ask, with all of this investment in education, do you believe the state will eventually be able to reduce the size of the social safety net because, people will have more tools to succeed?
That's always the goal. I think that all of us in the legislature, what we're trying to do with all the bills we pass and all the bills we pass and with the safety nets is to make sure everybody has a level playing field, right? So we know the reality is that we all like to say it shouldn't matter what zip code you're born into, but we know that that has a big issue, a big impact on the future you're going to have. So yes, leveling that playing field educationally and giving those people opportunities to really break that generational cycle of poverty, that's really the issue. So are we looking at being able to reduce the cost of mass health down the road because people have jobs and have private insurance? Sure, but that's probably a good 10, 15 years away. Are we looking at reducing the subsidies around housing vouchers? Perhaps, but again, we're talking about a generation away. The young people today that are in 5th or 6th or maybe even junior high, they're going to get this infused money into their education and these opportunities and hopefully be able to go on to community college. Again, you're talking about 10 years before they're in the workforce. So I think in some ways that's an overall goal. I mean, it's always the goal to reduce what we're spending and be able to put it somewhere else. But I think about how we have to address issues that come up that maybe weren't on the radar 10 years ago, like the opioid crisis. I fully support the funding we put into opioid crisis. It needs to be dealt with. Prevention obviously is key. Making sure that people who are in an opioid crisis or addiction issues have those supports in their community. But of course, in some ways, I'd love to be able to put that money into education or into transportation. But that's a need today. So it's hard to say what's going to happen in 10 or 15 years. But absolutely, the more educated workforce we have, the more companies that see Massachusetts as a place to come and have those job opportunities. Be it in Holyoke, now we have Amazon coming to Holyoke. They see our location, they see the workforce, they know it's going to be a good investment for them. The more we can do that, obviously Boston's doing a great job of that with the biotech field and the insurance field and so many other fields. We got to spread that across the Commonwealth, and I think that's going to, you will see sort of a decrease in that need, but again, not for a few years down the road.
Absolutely. I want to shift gears a little bit. I know that you are on the Cannabis Policy Commission, and I want to get your thoughts on this vape ban that the governor just put into effect. Do you believe that marijuana vaping products should have been included in that ban?
It's a very interesting question, and I think that the ban on vaping, not that I oppose it, but I feel like it's the blunt object in a situation where, let's be honest, how many people die every year from smoking cigarettes? We don't ban that. How many people die every year from alcohol? We don't ban that. Let's not bring up the gun issue, right? So I think it's a reaction. Obviously, it's in his purview to do that. My understanding is that it's not the cannabis that's the issue, right? We've got that over-regulated. We've got the inspections. We've got all that going on. It's this flavoring that isn't regulated anywhere. And it really, again, falls on the federal government. Here's this product being used before vaping and marijuana or cannabis was being used in tobacco vaping. And we all know that there's regulations around tobacco, but everything they put into it, all the additives, all that stuff they put into it afterwards, and then these flavors have never been regulated. So it's definitely an interesting sort of loophole, if you will, I think, there, that the first main product is being regulated, as well as it should be, but then this additive has never been regulated. And of course, you have the black market. And I think, unfortunately, what the ban is going to do is increase the black market. That's the reality. People who either smoke cigarettes and have gone to vaping and saying that that's helping them out, and they can't get that product anymore, they're going to go to the black market. The cannabis black market has barely been dented so far. We're barely a year into having retail stores, even in Massachusetts, and so the black market's alive and well. I think that black market's fed from two different ways. One is products from other states where it is legal, and places like China. And we all know the reputation and the history of products from China in our consumer industry here in Massachusetts is not, in the country, is not good. So that's the fear. So you put a ban across the board, people are still going to get it. So I think that, and they're probably going to get even worse product, because maybe the cannabis isn't even regulated in the product they're getting. So I think that it's a slippery slope with this ban. I know that the committee's working on legislation around it. There was some vaping regulation going on as well. So I'm not sure it's going to have the desired effect that the governor wants. I'm not really sure what effect he really has in it. But obviously, as far as him including it in Canada, including the ban, including cannabis, we know he was never in favor of this industry anyways. So I do think it's maybe a way for him to sort of temper this industry that he was never in favor of, which is definitely, not a positive for the communities that are looking to have these cannabis grow facilities and the retail, especially for the tax dollars and the jobs. So hopefully this 4 months will go by quickly and we can get some real legislation in place. But really, the real hope will be that the federal government stops and figures out a way to regulate these flavorings and these other products that are being put in. And in fact, I know in Holyoke we have had a very active youth commission, and they made some strides. And again, when I was on the city council on public health issues, and there was actually, we raised the age for buying cigarettes to 21 before the state did. We were one of those communities that did that. There's also a flavor ban in Holyoke for vaping, not with cannabis, but for vaping. And the only thing you can sell was mint, menthol, and then regular. So maybe that would have been a better ban, just to ban the flavoring, but I'm not the governor.
Very interesting take. I just have one last question for you. I know that you're an active member of the Holyoke community. In fact, I just learned that you and your wife own a yoga studio. Can you just talk to me a little bit about that, and maybe if you have a message for constituents who might feel disconnected from you in Boston or in Holyoke, where they can find you and really what you're doing in the community?
Sure. Holyoke's a great community to represent. I mean, it has its struggles, but it has an amazing history. I think about the institutions we have one of the last remaining community hospitals, we have Holyoke Community College, we have one of the only 2 soldiers' homes. It's an amazing resource of natural beauty. We've got a reservoir. We were a green community before green was a catch thing, right? We have a dam that powers 86% of our power in Holyoke from hydropower. So it's a very great place to be. And I think one of the things that constituents and business leaders and community leaders always say about me is that I'm everywhere. So as far as constituents, we're on Facebook, we're on social media. We have an office right on High Street, 295 High Street, right next to Holyoke Hummus, right next to the City Hall, so you can come down. I always call my legislative aide, Pat Duffy, is amazing. She's everywhere if I'm not there. Even today, just in Boston, I think we've answered 4 or 5 constituent phone calls. So we hold office hours monthly at the senior center and the library. And I think, I try to keep my yoga studio or my yoga place where I teach yoga a political free zone, but it never really is, right? Everyone says, "Oh, that was a great class," and by the way, what about that bill? My favorite place to talk to people, the grocery store, right? We call it stop and talk instead of stop and shop, because it takes me about an hour to get through just to buy a loaf of bread and some juice. But that's part of the job. I was at a birthday party this weekend with friends. One of my son's friends' birthday party, his parents were talking to me about support decision-making bill that I filed for people with disability. Another person wanted to talk about the education bill. So I think it's par for the course that if you're in this job, you've got to be really willing and able to talk to people whenever they want to meet with you. And Holyokeers want to talk, and they want to be involved, and they want to know what's going on, and I think that's great.